The camera pans across the buzzing studio, capturing the excited expressions of the live audience as the familiar theme music plays. Bright lights illuminate the set, casting a theatrical glow over the polished floor and the unmistakable silhouette of Bill Maher as he walks to center stage with his signature confident stride. The crowd erupts in applause, some cheering enthusiastically, others more reserved, as Maher offers a smug smile and a nod, soaking in the moment. He raises his hand slightly to quiet the audience and begins his monologue, peppered with dry humor and topical jabs that draw occasional laughter. The energy is electric, but there's a noticeable anticipation lingering in the room, a buzz that isn't just for Maher's routine. As the applause dies down and the introductions begin, the camera cuts to the guest area. Jasmine Crockett is seated, her posture upright and poised, dressed in a crisp, stylish suit that commands attention without saying a word. She's calm, composed, and observant, her eyes tracking Maher as he transitions to the night's discussion. The crowd reacts again, louder this time, when her name is announced. There's a noticeable shift in energy, some in the audience clap harder, some nod in approval, and a few even whistle. Maher offers a wry smile as he turns toward her, greeting her with a mildly sarcastic compliment, the kind that sounds polite but carries a hidden edge. Crockett simply smiles, her expression unreadable, offering a handshake that's firm but graceful. The tension is subtle but real, the air charged with the possibility of conflict, of confrontation cloaked in civility. Maher dives into his first question, his tone light, but the content clearly intended to provoke. He references a recent policy stance Crockett supported, framing it with a heavy dose of skepticism. The audience reacts with scattered chuckles, unsure whether to laugh or wait. Crockett listens intently, not interrupting, her expression unfazed. She leans forward slightly, maintaining eye contact, signaling she's ready, not just to respond, but to command the moment. Bill Maher leans back in his chair, an almost mischievous grin on his face as he prepares to escalate. With a casual flick of his hand, he frames his next comment as a joke but laces it with condescension. He questions whether Jasmine Crockett truly understands the complexities of the bill she championed, calling it cute how politicians play dress up with policy. A few chuckles ripple through the crowd, but it's not the thunderous laughter Maher expected. Crockett doesn't flinch, she keeps her eyes on him, her smile intact but slightly colder now, her silence sharper than any words. The pause stretches just long enough to become uncomfortable. Maher tries to read her, misinterpreting her calm for hesitation. He shifts in his chair, maybe expecting her to laugh it off, to play along with the performance. But Crockett leans in, slow and deliberate, her voice calm and low, with just a trace of amusement. She starts by acknowledging the joke, but immediately follows with a subtle correction. She quotes a section of the bill word for word, her memory flawless. She breaks down the clause Maher mocked, explaining its importance not just politically, but how it tangibly impacts lives in her district. Her delivery is smooth, matter of fact, but underneath is the quiet sting of someone who has come prepared for battle. Maher tries to interject, perhaps to pivot or undercut her point, but she raises her hand slightly, not rudely, just firmly enough to signal that she's not finished. The crowd notices. Her composure is magnetic. She pivots then, not just defending her position but turning the focus on Maher's mischaracterization. She calls out the patronizing tone, wrapped in humor, and notes how often women, especially black women in politics, are expected to smile through belittling critiques disguised as comedy. The audience grows still, now fully tuned in. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. Every word lands with weight. Maher, caught slightly off guard, shifts again, attempting a chuckle to ease the tension. But Crockett's steady gaze doesn't waver. She closes her point with a tight, elegant line that leaves no doubt. She's not here to play along, she's here to be heard. The crowd begins to respond, not with awkward chuckles now, but with affirming claps and a few vocal agreements. Maher blinks, not quite ready for the momentum she's building. The balance on set has changed. Bill Maher adjusts his posture, clearly sensing the conversation slipping from his control. He shifts to a more assertive tone, grasping for authority by referencing one of Jasmine Crockett's previous interviews. He pulls a quote, deliberately truncated, framing it to suggest that she contradicted herself on a major policy stance. The crowd murmurs, sensing a challenge, but Crockett remains still. Her expression doesn't change, but there's a flicker in her eyes, a subtle signal that she's ready to strike. She calmly waits for him to finish, letting him complete his setup without interruption. The silence that follows his statement lingers a beat longer than expected. Crockett straightens, then speaks with clarity and precision, calling out the quote for what it is, manipulated and incomplete. She recites the full context of her original statement, correcting him in real time. The facts are on her side, and she lays them out not with anger, but with deliberate authority. The audience listens in silence, the gravity of her words slicing through the room. Maher opens his mouth to interject again, but Crockett continues, her voice unwavering. She points out how often media personalities like Maher selectively clip statements to create controversy instead of engaging with substance. The moment shifts decisively. What began as an attempt to catch her off guard is now a full reversal, Maher visibly unsettled, forced to listen as Crockett exposes the tactics being used against her. She then pivots again, seamlessly broadening her response to highlight the bigger picture, how nuanced policy debates are flattened into sound bites, and how politicians of color are disproportionately scrutinized for their wording rather than their ideas. A few audience members nod, some clap quietly. Maher finally speaks, trying to lighten the mood with a joke, but it falls flat. His punchline lands with no reaction. Crockett leans back now, letting her final line of the exchange settle like dust after a storm. She doesn't gloat, she doesn't need to. The power has shifted, and everyone feels it. The studio isn't laughing anymore, they're watching, wide-eyed, as Maher fumbles to reset. The tension lingers, electric and undeniable. Jasmine Crockett takes a slow breath, allowing the silence to stretch just long enough to make the tension palpable. Then she leans forward, her eyes locked on Maher, her voice calm but unmistakably firm. She begins by addressing the subtle power dynamics that have played out over the course of their exchange. She speaks about how women, especially black women in public office, are expected to perform a certain way, measured, agreeable, careful not to offend even when they're being dismissed. Maher raises an eyebrow, clearly not expecting her to go this route. The audience is quiet now, tuned into every syllable. Crockett continues, pointing out how men like Maher often dominate conversations, interrupt, redirect, and mask condescension with humor. You don't have to yell to be loud, she says, her voice even. You just have to speak while others are trying to silence you. The words hit like a brick through glass. Maher tries to interject with a smirk, aiming to pivot the tone, but Crockett doesn't let him. She calls him out, directly and by name, for using his platform not to foster discourse but to play intellectual gatekeeper, deciding who gets to be taken seriously and who gets reduced to a punchline. Her tone sharpens slightly, the precision of her words landing clean. You invited me here to talk, she says, but what you really wanted was to talk over me and see if I'd smile through it. The crowd erupts in applause, this time more visceral, less polite. A few even stand. Maher's face twitches, he forces a grin, clearly thrown. He mutters something about being misunderstood, but the moment is already lost. Crockett doesn't let up, she hammers home her final point, laying out a brief but devastating comparison of lived experience versus punditry. You comment on policies from a desk, she says. I live the consequences with my constituents every single day. That line alone sends a shiver through the room. Maher, speechless for once, sits back. The power dynamic has flipped completely, and he knows it. Crockett reclines slightly, her expression calm again, her point delivered not with rage, but with calculated precision. The room doesn't just react, they absorb. Something in the atmosphere has changed. The audience sees it, Maher feels it, Crockett owns it. The closing segment begins, and Bill Maher, visibly trying to regain his footing, attempts to pivot to a lighter tone. He chuckles awkwardly, tossing out a self-deprecating remark meant to dissolve the tension. But it doesn't land. The studio doesn't respond the way it usually does. There's a hesitance, an awareness that something real just happened, something bigger than a comedy bit or a policy debate. Jasmine Crockett remains composed, gracious, and calm. She offers a brief smile, a nod of acknowledgement, but she doesn't backtrack or soften her words. Instead, she thanks Maher for having her on, her voice steady and measured, letting the weight of the previous exchange linger in the room. The audience, still energized by her powerful rebuttals, begins clapping again, this time louder, more deliberate. A few members rise to their feet, applauding her not just for her presence, but for her courage, her clarity, and the dignity with which she stood her ground. Maher looks momentarily stunned, his usual air of control slightly cracked. He fumbles with his cue cards, attempting to regain momentum, but there's a visible disconnect. Crockett rises from her chair, offering a poised farewell, her exit as commanding as her entrance. The camera catches her walking off stage, head held high, as the applause continues behind her. Maher tries to push forward with his closing remarks, but the room isn't quite with him anymore. The moment belongs to Crockett. As the credits roll, the internet lights up instantly, clips from the show begin circulating on social media, quotes from Crockett's comebacks being tweeted out with lightning speed. Commentators, fans, and critics all take notice. The confrontation becomes the headline. It's not just a talk show moment, it's a political statement, a cultural shift. Maher, for once, is no longer the one steering the narrative. The audience saw something authentic, and it resonated. In that final moment, Crockett didn't just win the exchange, she redefined the space entirely.